Am I losing my mind over a simple bathroom habit? I'm honestly still stunned writing this. Earlier today, the water in our apartment was shut off for a short repair. Nothing dramatic. Our landlord said it would be back within the hour. In the meantime, we still had a small countertop filter for drinking water and plenty of hand sanitizer. I used the bathroom first and, like a normal person, washed my hands using a bit of the filtered water. When my partner finished using the bathroom, she walked straight out and dropped onto the couch beside me like nothing happened. I asked, calmly at first, if she was going to wash her hands. She laughed it off and said she wasn't wasting drinking water on that. I suggested hand sanitizer instead. That's when she casually told me she didn't need it, because, according to her, she doesn't wash her hands every time she uses the toilet. She said as long as she doesn't see anything on her hands, she considers them clean. Something in me snapped. I told her that was gross and an awful hygiene habit. Not screamed, just blunt. I pointed out that even if you're careful, you're still touching the toilet, the handle, the door. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic and judgmental. For context, we do have a bidet, which she insists makes this whole thing a non-issue. To me, it really doesn't. Now she's completely shut down, won't speak to me, and says I owe her an apology for shaming her. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there wondering how long this has been going on and how many shared surfaces of touch without knowing. I'm not trying to control her. I'm not demanding perfection. I just can't wrap my head around being told that basic handwashing is optional, and being expected to pretend that's normal. Am I really endangering Christmas over a few cookies? I'm hosting Christmas Eve at my home this year, something I've done for years. And my tradition is a big dessert table instead of a single cake. Baking is my thing, and I usually put out a wide spread of homemade cookies so everyone can pick their favorites. This year is a little different because my daughter-in-law has 2 children from a previous marriage, both under 12, who have a peanut allergy. It's not contact-based, but if they eat peanuts they break out badly and swell. Because of that, I planned ahead. I decided to keep any peanut-based cookies on a separate table, clearly labeled, and bake them at different times to avoid cross-contamination. Everything else would be completely peanut-free. I explained this plan to my son, and he was fine with it. He said he'd remind the kids, who already manage their allergies at school and other events without issue. A few days later, my daughter-in-law called and immediately shut the idea down. She insisted there couldn't be anything with peanuts in the house at all and said having those cookies out would be tempting the kids. I told her I wasn't comfortable scrapping recipes I've made for years, especially when precautions were already in place and other guests enjoyed them. I suggested that keeping an eye on the kids, like they do everywhere else, would solve the problem. That didn't go over well. The call escalated quickly, and she accused me of being careless and selfish, even calling me names before hanging up. Later, my son reached out and said while he agreed the setup was reasonable, I could have handled the conversation with more diplomacy. Now I'm left feeling like what was supposed to be a thoughtful compromise somehow turned into a family standoff right before the holidays. Was I wrong for refusing a late-night favor after I'd settled in? I've always been very strict about how I end my days. Once I get home from my job, change out of my work clothes, shower, and switch into my comfortable home clothes, my day is done. That usually happens around early evening, and everyone close to me knows that once I reach that point, I don't go back out unless there's a real emergency. I don't enjoy leaving the house after I've unwound, and I only make exceptions for serious situations. One night, not long after I had already changed and settled in, my friend Mark called me. He asked if I could drive his partner, Lena, home from her evening sports practice later that night. I asked why he couldn't pick her up himself, and he explained that his supervisor unexpectedly made him stay late at work due to issues earlier in the day. I reminded him that I was already done for the night, but he kept pushing, saying it would be quick. I still refused, because to me this didn't feel urgent or unavoidable. A few hours later, close to midnight, Mark showed up at my place visibly frustrated. He told me Lena had ended up waiting nearly 2 hours until he was finally able to leave work and get her. I asked why she hadn't arranged a ride through a taxi or ride-share service, and he said she didn't have one set up. That didn't sit right with me, because it felt like a lack of planning on their part rather than something I was responsible for fixing. The situation apparently caused a major argument between them afterward. From my point of view, there was no immediate danger. The weather was mild for the time of year, and it wasn't raining or particularly cold. Growing up, I often waited long stretches for rides in far worse conditions, including harsh weather, and it was considered normal. Because of that, I'm struggling to see whether I truly did something wrong here or if I was simply holding a boundary I've always been clear about. Did I completely ruin a moment with my teen over a TV show? I was relaxing in the living room one evening, watching a series, when my 15-year-old niece, who lives with me, came in and asked what I was watching. She immediately lit up and told me she had a show I had to see, saying the opening scenes were some of the best television ever made. I agreed to give it a try and started queuing it up. And while it played, she stayed right there, excitedly talking through every moment, pointing out details, explaining characters, and telling me why each scene mattered. By the time we finished the opening, she asked me to pause it and wanted to know what I thought. I hesitated and said I didn't really have any original thoughts yet, because I hadn't had a chance to just watch and process it on my own. I explained that hearing everything in advance made it hard for me to form my own reaction. She immediately got upset, stood up, and walked down the hallway saying I could have at least pretended to care. I told her that I genuinely wanted to care and that I probably would have enjoyed it even more if I'd been able to experience it quietly first. She shut herself in her room after that, and the whole house felt tense. I wasn't trying to dismiss her or her interests, but now I'm wondering if I handled the moment badly and hurt her feelings more than I realized. Did I cross a line by refusing to save Christmas for someone else's kids? I'm a woman in my late 30s with 2 young children of my own, both still in grade school, and we live very carefully within our means. Every dollar is planned, every bill accounted for. By early December, my partner and I had already stretched ourselves to make sure our kids' Christmas was covered, gifts wrapped and tucked away. Around the same time, a close family member, someone I grew up alongside, was barely surviving after losing her spouse unexpectedly just a few months earlier. She has 2 toddlers, and the loss shattered her ability to function in ways I can't even fully describe. Since the death, I've done everything I could to hold things together for her. I took her children with mine to fall events when she couldn't get out of bed, kept them for weekends so she could sleep or cry without an audience, and showed up whenever she called in the middle of the night. When the holidays started approaching, she admitted she couldn't bring herself to shop at all, so the family quietly stepped in. I bought gifts for her kids on top of my own, even though money was already tight, because the idea of them waking up to nothing felt unbearable. Then life hit my household too. I was involved in a minor accident. No injuries, thankfully, but the repair costs were brutal. Between that, groceries, and rent, we were suddenly counting pennies just to stay afloat. Not long after, she called me in tears, saying she didn't think her children had enough for Christmas morning. I tried to explain calmly that I had truly done all I could, that there simply wasn't any extra money left. I even suggested ordering a few more things online to arrive after the holiday if shopping felt impossible. That suggestion upset her deeply. She insisted that anything arriving late would ruin Christmas and accused me of not understanding how important this was. That conversation broke something in me. I felt like all the nights, favors, money, and emotional labor I'd poured into helping her survive were suddenly invisible because I couldn't magically create more. Other relatives had already contributed as well, but somehow it still wasn't enough. I know grief makes people desperate and irrational, and I don't blame her for hurting, but I also can't ignore how small and guilty she made me feel for having limits. I'm exhausted, financially strained, and emotionally torn between compassion and resentment. I never promised to replace what she lost, only to help where I could. Am I wrong for finally saying I can't give more, even when children and Christmas are involved? Should I refuse a baby name that feels like a memorial? I'm in my early 30s and expecting my first child with my partner. We live in a coastal city in another country now, far from most of our relatives, and what should be a joyful time has been complicated by loss. My partner's stepfather, who helped raise him, passed away about 3 years ago. As my partner gets ready to become a parent himself, that absence has been hitting him hard, and it's shaped almost every conversation about our future. I'm about 7 months along, and we've chosen not to learn the baby's sex ahead of time. I still wanted us to prepare a short list of names so we aren't scrambling in the hospital. That's where the conflict started. My partner is set on naming the baby after his stepfather. If the baby is a boy, he wants to use the exact full name, first and middle. If it's a girl, he wants a forced, awkward version of that same name. Even though it isn't a real or commonly used name, he won't consider similar names, nicknames, or variations, and he won't agree to using it as a middle name. What complicates things further is that his stepfather openly disliked his own name and complained about it often. Beyond that, I just don't like the name at all, and I had hoped we could honor someone from my side of the family too. I suggested a compromise where we use his stepfather's name as a middle name, regardless of the baby's sex, but my partner shut that down completely. To him, anything less than a first name feels like erasing his stepfather's memory. He's told me that if I don't agree, he'll carry resentment for a long time, which feels like a lot of emotional weight to put on one decision. I understand he's grieving, and I don't want to be cruel or dismissive of that. At the same time, I feel strongly that naming our child should be a shared decision, not a memorial that overrides my feelings entirely. I've even thought about giving in now and asking for full naming rights if we ever have another child, but that idea already makes me feel bitter and sidelined. I'm stuck between wanting to be compassionate about his grief and wanting to protect my own voice in a decision that will follow our child for life. Would I be wrong if I refused to use his stepfather's name as our baby's first name and insisted on a compromise instead? Am I wrong for choosing my partner over my family at Christmas? I'm a 26-year-old woman who recently moved in with my partner, a 30-year-old man I've been dating for just over 5 months. And this Christmas feels like it's turning into an emotional minefield. Until now, my family's holidays have always been split because my parents divorced years ago. The routine was predictable: a quiet meal with my father at one house, then later drinks, gifts, and forced cheer with my mother at another. My siblings, both in their 20s, stuck to this system too, while their partners always spent Christmas elsewhere with their own families. It wasn't perfect, but it was familiar. This year changed everything. My partner's parents invited us to their home outside the city and even extended an open invitation to my entire family for Christmas dinner. It felt like a big step for us as a couple, especially since we've just started building a life together. I tried to include my side of the family so no one would feel left out. But when I invited my mother and siblings, she shut it down immediately. She said Christmas had never been done this way and insisted it should be spent at her house. Just like always, with her children under one roof. The tone made it clear that my growing independence wasn't welcome. Trying to keep the peace, I came up with a compromise. I invited my father to join us at my partner's family dinner, thinking my siblings could stay with my mother, and I'd stop by for drinks and presents before heading out. My mother agreed on the surface, but her disappointment was obvious when I mentioned that next year we could do Christmas her way. She brushed it off, saying she doesn't plan that far ahead, which somehow made it feel heavier, like a quiet warning that time is running out. Then, just a day before Christmas Eve, everything collapsed. My father canceled at the last minute, saying he wanted to be alone this year because he had to work early the next morning. Suddenly, I was left staring at an impossible choice: cancel on my partner's family, who had already planned and welcomed me, or go through with it and risk this being one of the last Christmases I ever spend away from my parents. The guilt is crushing, and the decorations and lights just make it worse, like they're mocking me for growing up. So now I'm torn between tradition and the future I'm trying to build. Between my parents' expectations and my own happiness. Am I really the villain here for changing how Christmas looks and choosing to spend it with the person I love? Is it wrong to hide holiday food from someone who keeps taking it? For the past several years, I, 41F, have taken on the role of hosting a small but meaningful Christmas dinner at my home with my husband. It's never been a huge gathering, usually just us, my childhood friend and her boyfriend, and occasionally my mother-in-law, but it's something I put a lot of time, money, and emotional energy into. I plan the menu weeks in advance, budget carefully, and try to make it a warm, stress-free tradition everyone can enjoy. About 3 years ago, my brother-in-law moved in with us. At first, things were mostly fine, but a recurring issue quickly surfaced: food. The first Christmas he lived with us, just 2 days before the dinner, I went to check on the ham I had bought specifically for Christmas, and discovered that half of it was gone. I was shocked. When I brought it up, he shrugged and said he thought he was part of everyone, so he didn't see the problem. The thing is, while he lives with us, he doesn't actually participate in the holiday at all. He stays in his room the entire time and only comes out once the guests have left. After that incident, I tried to be proactive. The following 2 years, I very clearly told him, please don't open or take the ham before Christmas dinner. It's meant for everyone, and it isn't very big. I buy a small, expensive holiday ham, not a massive one, because we're a small group. Each year, he acknowledged me, and each year, he still helped himself anyway. He never told me, never asked, and never replaced it. I'd only find out at the worst possible moment, right before hosting, when I realized half the main dish was missing again. This problem doesn't stop with holidays. On a regular basis, when he needs groceries, he'll give us a list and his credit card, and we'll pick up exactly what he asks for. Despite that, he continues to eat food my husband and I buy for ourselves, especially items I specifically purchase for my own meals. It's reached the point where I feel like I can't rely on anything staying where I put it, even after repeated conversations. Now, with another Christmas coming up, I'm exhausted just thinking about repeating the same cycle. I have a mini fridge in my home office, and I'm seriously considering storing the holiday food there so it won't disappear before Christmas Day. But part of me feels resentful that I even have to do this in my own house. It feels petty, secretive, and unfair, but I'm also tired of being ignored and having my efforts undermined year after year. So, am I wrong for wanting to hide the Christmas food just so it actually makes it to the table this time? Should I have to wear clothes to bed because my roommate has a girlfriend? I'm in my mid-20s and share an apartment with a housemate I've lived with for a while. Ever since I was a teenager, I've slept without clothes because I overheat easily and it's the only way I can actually rest. I'm careful about it. Anytime I leave my room, even just to grab water or head to the shower, I'm dressed or at least covered. and we both normally knock before entering each other's rooms. This routine has never been an issue, and he's always known how I sleep. The problem started when he invited his partner to stay over for a few nights. We've all hung out before and generally get along, but this was the first time they stayed overnight. One night we came back late after drinking, and everyone went straight to bed. At some point in the middle of the night, his partner got up to find the bathroom and accidentally opened my bedroom door instead. Since it's right next to it, I was half asleep and barely registered it before the door closed again. The next morning, both of them were upset with me. She was uncomfortable because she saw me naked, and they said I was wrong for sleeping that way at all when there was a guest in the apartment. They told me I should start wearing clothes to bed since she'll likely be staying over more often. I told them I understood the situation was awkward, but I was in my own private room, and the door was only opened by mistake. I didn't think I should have to change how I sleep in my own space. Since then, things have escalated. My housemate keeps bringing it up, and once he even opened my door on purpose while I was sleeping to check whether I was naked. That crossed a line for me. I don't feel embarrassed about him seeing me, but it feels invasive and unnecessary, especially when the original issue came from someone entering my room without knocking. I still don't think it's reasonable to expect me to change what I do in private just because it makes his partner uncomfortable. Am I a monster for banning a service dog and ruining Christmas for everyone? I'm a 38-year-old man who hosts our extended family's Christmas Eve gathering every year. It's a big, loud tradition with lots of relatives, food, kids running around, and people coming and going all night. I host because my house is the largest. It's centrally located, and for years it's just been understood that Christmas happens here. It's stressful, expensive, and exhausting, but I do it because it matters to my family. Last year, a relative of mine showed up with a service dog in training. I was told the dog was still very young, barely over a year old, and I didn't really know what to expect. I've never owned dogs and don't have much experience with them, especially not in a crowded house full of children, food, and noise. Unfortunately, it didn't go well. The dog had multiple accidents in my house, caused disruptions, and there was one incident involving my child that really crossed a line for me. I later found out I wasn't the only one uncomfortable. Another family member quietly complained to me as well. After that holiday, I decided I didn't want to repeat. A few weeks ago, while planning this year's party, I casually asked around whether that same relative would be attending. I was told by multiple people that she wouldn't be there, so I assumed the issue had resolved itself. Then, just days ago, I was suddenly informed that she was coming after all. Realizing I needed to address it immediately, I called her and told her she was absolutely welcome to attend. But the dog was not. I explained that last year's experience wasn't something I was willing to repeat in my own home, especially with kids and a large crowd. I tried to be calm and straightforward, not cruel. That single conversation detonated the entire holiday. Her parents and siblings immediately threatened to boycott Christmas altogether. I was accused of being heartless, discriminatory, and selfish. In an attempt to compromise, I even offered to let the dog stay outside during the event. But I was told that suggestion was offensive and completely unreasonable. Now the family group chats are exploding. People are taking sides, and I'm being blamed for potentially canceling Christmas Eve altogether. I feel like I'm being punished for setting a boundary in my own home after a genuinely bad experience last year. I'm exhausted, frustrated, and honestly shocked at how fast this spiraled. So am I really the villain for not wanting an untrained service dog inside my house during Christmas? Am I heartless for refusing to play Happy Family at Christmas? Every December, my mother turns our house into a shrine to togetherness. Garlands on the stairs, candles in every window, the same old records playing on repeat. Christmas is her sacred season. The time when she believes all wounds should magically close if we just sit at the same table and smile hard enough. For years, I went along with it, even when it meant swallowing comments and insults from a close relative and her spouse who have never approved of my life. They made it clear they despised that I was divorced, that I was raising my child alone, and that I didn't fit their idea of what a proper family should look like. Still, every Christmas, I showed up with gifts and good manners, telling myself it was for my mom. The breaking point came after my father died. Right in the middle of winter, when grief was already hanging over everything like cold fog. Instead of pulling together, that same relative and her partner spread ugly stories about me and questioned my parenting behind my back, all while Christmas decorations were still up. After that, they stopped speaking to me entirely unless it was unavoidable. Months passed, holidays came and went. I spent more time in therapy than shopping malls, trying to undo the damage they'd caused. Eventually, I accepted that peace didn't exist with them in my life, and I stepped away from my own sanity, even if it disappointed my mother. This Christmas was the first time I returned to my mom's house in nearly a year. I told myself I'd keep it quiet, just lights, food, and time with her and my child. Within hours of arriving, the relative's spouse showed up unexpectedly, dropping off their kids like nothing was wrong. No greeting, no apology, Just tension thick enough to cut through the tinsel. I later found out they'd left a wrapped present for me under the tree. My name written neatly as if none of the past had happened. I didn't touch it. To me, it felt like a performance, not peace. When my mother asked if I had bought a gift for that relative, I said no. I wasn't going to spend money, energy, or emotion pretending Christmas had erased years of cruelty. My mother's face fell. She said I was ruining the holiday spirit. That Christmas is about forgiveness. That I was being stubborn and dramatic. But standing in that glowing living room, surrounded by lights and ornaments meant to symbolize love, all I could think was how tired I was of being the only one expected to make things nice for the sake of the season. Did I ruin our Christmas game by guessing the word too fast? After Christmas dinner, when the lights were low, the tree was still glowing, and everyone was settled in that warm, overstuffed, slightly chaotic holiday mood, my extended family decided to play our usual Christmas guessing game. It's something we do almost every year. Everyone writes a Christmas-related word or phrase on a slip of paper. Songs, traditions, characters, folklore, tosses them into a bowl, and then we randomly take one to someone else's forehead. The goal isn't really to win. It's to drag it out as long as possible. People ask ridiculous yes or no questions, misunderstand the rules, argue over technicalities, and the whole thing usually dissolves into laughter. For reference, earlier in the game I had written the nice list, which my uncle ended up guessing after a long, goofy struggle, so everything was normal, until it was my turn. As soon as the paper went on my forehead, things felt off. One cousin squinted at me and said, genuinely confused, I don't even know what that is. Another person shrugged and said they'd heard of it but didn't really get it. That immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Because this wasn't supposed to be an obscure trivia contest, then it clicked. My brother is obsessed with obscure Christmas lore. Not Santa, not reindeer, not Hallmark stuff. He's into the dark, old European folklore. Every year he brings up weird traditions no one asked about. And there's one character he talks about constantly. So I said, half joking, I think I know whose word this is. He didn't deny it. I asked my first question, am I something you can hold in your hands? Quote, everyone said no. My uncle added, I still don't know what that is. That was enough. I didn't even need a second question. I immediately said, am I the Krampus? Quote, I was right. The game ended instantly. I'd barely started, and the round was over before anyone could stall, joke, or argue about technicalities. Instead of laughter, there was a long pause. And then my brother got genuinely upset. He said I'd ruined the fun. That he'd been excited to watch people struggle to figure out Krampus. And that I took the fun out of it by guessing so fast he made it clear he felt like I'd spoiled a Christmas moment he was looking forward to. Now I'm stuck wondering if I actually grinched the game by winning too efficiently. Or if it's unreasonable to expect someone not to connect the dots when the answer is an obscure Christmas demon only one person in the room is obsessed with. So did I ruin Christmas game night? Or was this just an unfortunate case of knowing your family too well? Am I wrong for choosing a quiet Christmas after the NICU nearly broke us? After giving birth in late November, I thought we had a clear plan for the holidays. The idea was to spend Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and the day after with my partner's family, giving us about a month at home first to settle in with our newborn and find our rhythm. That plan fell apart fast. Our baby ended up in the neonatal intensive care unit and stayed there for almost 4 weeks. On top of that, I had a serious medical scare myself and experienced a postpartum hemorrhage at home 2 weeks ago. Between medications, monitoring blood sugar levels, and the emotional whiplash of it all, the past month has been exhausting and overwhelming. Our baby has only been home for 3 full days. We're still adjusting, still anxious, still healing. Because of that, we decided the safest and calmest option was to stay home for Christmas. We told family they were welcome to come by briefly, and I even said I was open to a short visit on Christmas Day. But we wouldn't be traveling anywhere or hosting long, drawn-out gatherings. Being in our own space feels essential right now. This decision didn't go over well with my partner's mother. She's extremely upset and has said she may not come at all. Her frustration grew when she found out another relative would be visiting around the same time. The difference is that this other person actually helped, bringing meals, doing laundry, and even cleaning up after my medical emergency at home. My partner's mother tends to frame her help as wanting to hold a baby so I can get things done. Which, right now, isn't what I need most. My partner admitted she expected this reaction and said it felt like an impossible situation where someone was bound to be hurt. She's tried to stay neutral, not really taking sides, which leaves me feeling a bit alone in holding this boundary. I've already compromised more than I wanted to. I allowed a visit less than a day after we got home. Even though I wanted more time, I've offered multiple short visits over the holidays. I even agreed to make the trip to see them in early January. At this point, I'm not sure what else I can reasonably give without sacrificing my recovery or my peace of mind. I'm exhausted, still healing, and just trying to protect our baby and ourselves. Am I wrong for wanting a quiet Christmas after everything we've been through? Did I ruin Christmas by giving one child an unfair gift? A few weeks before the holidays, my partner and I decided to surprise our only child with something big. A ticket to a live show just before the new year. It wasn't a casual gift. The venue is several hours away, required an overnight stay, time off work, and careful planning. I was going too, partly because she's still young, partly because I genuinely loved the artist, and partly because it felt like one of those rare, memory-making moments parents hope for. We wrapped the confirmation nicely and gave it to her early, and her reaction was pure joy. Not long after, my partner's sister called to chat about holiday plans. During the conversation, I mentioned the concert, not thinking much of it. There was a long pause, then a quiet comment about how her child would have loved something like that. She asked questions, where it was, when it was, how exciting it sounded, and eventually said outright that her kid would have been over the moon to go. By then, the ticket was already given, the plans already set, and my heart already sinking. After we hung up, the guilt hit hard. I checked the website and saw there were still tickets available, but buying another one wouldn't have been simple. That would mean explaining why only one of the other children was included. Arranging extra travel, supervision, and expenses we hadn't budgeted for, and quietly turning a carefully planned parent-child experience into something completely different. Our family circumstances aren't the same, financially or logistically, and this gift was something we chose intentionally for our own child. Now Christmas dinner is approaching, and the excitement in my house feels tangled with dread. I can already picture the moment when the story comes up, the comparison, the disappointment. I didn't mean to exclude anyone, but I can't undo what's already been given. What was supposed to be a joyful surprise now feels like a silent holiday landmine waiting to go off. Is it wrong to ban a Christmas turkey from our oven? Every Christmas, my spouse and I host the holiday at our home so our young children can stay put, open their gifts, and enjoy the day without being dragged around. We've done this for years, and it's become the expected routine for her side of the family. Both of us are lifelong vegetarians, not preachy or confrontational, but deeply uncomfortable with the realities of the meat industry. We don't stop others from eating what they choose. We just draw boundaries in our own home. Most of her relatives are also vegetarian, but her father and one sibling aren't. In past years, they handled this by cooking their turkey at their own house and reheating it in our microwave. That worked fine, because we never used the microwave ourselves and didn't really care. This year, however, the microwave broke, and since we have no use for it, we didn't replace it. Now my father-in-law insists that the turkey either be cooked or reheated in our oven instead. I said no. I explained that we don't want our oven, or our air fryer, used for cooking meat, especially something as pungent as turkey, because the smell alone makes us uncomfortable. I even offered a compromise. They could bring their own air fryer or make other arrangements. That suggestion was dismissed as unreasonable, and I was told we were putting silly beliefs ahead of the Christmas spirit. I've tried to be clear that we are not banning meat from our house. They are free to eat whatever they want here. We're simply asking that our own appliances not be used to cook it. The pushback has gotten so intense that I'm honestly considering buying a new microwave just to avoid the conflict entirely, even though it feels unfair to have to do that. So now I'm stuck wondering whether holding this boundary makes me unreasonable, or whether it's okay to say no, even at Christmas. Did I shatter Christmas by walking out on my mom's brother? I'm a man in my mid-30s, recently laid off from my job in tech, and actively trying to get back on my feet. Applications, interviews, follow-ups, it's all happening, just not as fast as anyone would like. I don't hide it, but I also don't want it dragged into every conversation, especially during the holidays when emotions already run high. This happened at a Christmas dinner hosted by my mother at my grandparents' house. The guest list was a usual mix of close family: my mom, my aunt, her husband, cousins, and my uncle, my mother's older brother, who has always enjoyed being the loudest voice in the room. I showed up early, brought a nice bottle of wine and a homemade dessert, helped in the kitchen, and did my best to be pleasant and low maintenance. I just wanted one calm evening where I wasn't reduced to my employment status. That didn't last. Almost as soon as we sat down, my uncle started in. First it was a casual jab about when I was joining the workforce again. I smiled tightly and said I was interviewing. He laughed and kept going. Throughout dinner, he made comment after comment about me being on a paid vacation, about Santa bringing me a job application, about how I must enjoy sleeping in while everyone else works. Each time, people chuckled awkwardly. No one told him to stop. My mom avoided eye contact. My aunt smiled like it was harmless teasing. By the fifth remark, my chest was tight and my appetite was gone. I finally said, calmly and clearly, that I'd really appreciate it if he dropped it because I was there to celebrate Christmas, not to be publicly mocked. He rolled his eyes and told me it was just jokes and that I needed to toughen up. Something about hearing that, after months of stress, rejection emails, and self-doubt, hit harder than I expected. I stood up, said a brief Merry Christmas. Everyone grabbed my coat and walked out into the cold without making a scene. I drove home shaking, half from anger and half from embarrassment. Later that night, my mother called me upset, saying I humiliated her, that I should have just ignored her brother because he's always been like that, and that my leaving made the whole dinner uncomfortable. Not once did she ask how I was doing or why it hurt so much. Now I'm being treated like the problem for refusing to sit there and be the family punchline on Christmas. And I can't stop wondering if protecting my dignity really made me the villain. Was I really wrong for wanting one sober Christmas in my own house? Alcohol has always been a sensitive subject for me. I grew up watching my father drink himself into someone unrecognizable, and that experience shaped my entire view of it. I've never touched alcohol, and I genuinely don't understand why so many people act like they can't relax, laugh, or celebrate without it. To me, it's not fun. It's triggering, uncomfortable, and exhausting. My husband's family, on the other hand, treats drinking like a personality trait. Every holiday is soaked in wine, cocktails, and just one more. I've swallowed my discomfort for years to keep the peace, sitting quietly while bottles emptied and conversations got louder and sloppier. I've never made it an issue before. This year was different. For the first time, Christmas was being hosted at our house. I was actually excited. I thought maybe this could finally be a calm, meaningful holiday, focused on food, conversation, and family instead of alcohol. So I made a decision. No alcohol in my home on Christmas. I didn't yell it from the rooftops or make a dramatic announcement. I simply decided that if I was hosting, this was the boundary. The fallout was immediate. My husband's sister called to ask what she could bring. She sounded cheerful, almost smug, as she described a festive Christmas martini she was dying to make. When I told her, calmly, that there wouldn't be alcohol this year, the tone of the call shifted instantly. She went cold, short answers, awkward silence. Then she hung up. Within hours, I started getting texts. Are you serious? That's so lame. It's Christmas. Lighten up. Some relatives hinted I was being controlling. Others flat out mocked the idea. I didn't respond. I wasn't asking anyone to quit drinking forever. I was asking for one day of respect in my own home. Then came the real slap in the face. I found out my sister-in-law had decided to host an alternative Christmas gathering at her house. One where alcohol would be flowing freely. And almost everyone chose to go there instead. Just like that, my Christmas dinner was abandoned. Not because of travel, not because of scheduling, but because they didn't want to be sober for a few hours. I felt humiliated, rejected, like I had drawn a line and everyone deliberately stepped over it just to prove they could. My husband didn't defend me. Instead, he told me he spoke to his sister and that we were invited to her gathering. He said I should stop making this an issue, that I was being dramatic, and that it wasn't worth the tension. In other words, give in, go along, and pretend none of this hurt. I refused. Now he's furious. He says I'm forcing him to miss Christmas with his family, that I'm punishing him for something that isn't that serious, and that I'm choosing my issues over everyone else's happiness. He keeps repeating that I'm ruining Christmas, completely ignoring the fact that I was the one pushed aside in the first place. All I wanted was one peaceful holiday in my own home, without alcohol, without anxiety, without old wounds being reopened. Instead, I'm being treated like the villain for daring to ask for it. Was I wrong to cancel Christmas gifts after a graduation dinner blow-up? After nearly 7 years together, I thought I understood my partner's family dynamics. But his graduation weekend pushed everything over the edge. His relatives have always struggled with money, yet somehow still manage to spend far beyond their limits, living as if consequences don't apply. When my partner finished his degree, my own family drove several hours to celebrate him, and I made it clear ahead of time that his family should be prepared to cover the cost of the graduation dinner. This was his milestone. After all, the price of the meal came up again and again in the days leading up to it, to the point that my partner felt so guilty he deliberately chose a cheap casual restaurant just to avoid tension. Even then, the night ended in embarrassment. His family asked to split the bill anyway. I was stunned. At my own graduation, my parents covered a large, expensive dinner without hesitation and never would have expected anyone else to chip in. Yet here, my family was asked to pay their share for my partner's celebration. And the amount, small as it was, felt insulting on principle. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. It felt rude, dismissive, and painfully uncomfortable for everyone involved. What made it worse was what happened shortly after. Just days later, his relatives were happily upgrading their phones, casually dropping hundreds of dollars and adding it to their growing debt without a second thought. Watching them spend freely on luxuries right after asking my family to help pay for a graduation dinner felt like a slap in the face. That was the moment something in me snapped. I told my partner that I was done extending myself for people who clearly didn't respect us. I decided I wouldn't be buying his family Christmas gifts this year, because I couldn't bring myself to reward behavior that felt so inconsiderate and hypocritical. Now I'm being made to feel cold and petty for drawing a line. But to me it feels like basic boundaries after one too many disappointments. So was I wrong for finally saying enough and letting Christmas be the breaking point? Did I go too far by letting Christmas disappear while he chased his dream? I'm a full-time parent to 2 young kids, and my spouse works long hours in a technical job. For the last several months, he's been obsessively saving money for an overseas sports trip, cutting back on household spending so he could afford it. I tried not to complain, even though it meant tighter groceries and no extras, because he kept saying this was the one thing he was finally doing for himself. When we talked about the holidays, he told me not to worry and said I should handle everything because he wouldn't be back until just days before Christmas. He claimed he'd set aside money for decorations, food, and gifts for the kids. When I finally saw the amount, it was barely enough to cover a single grocery run, let alone an entire holiday for a family. I was stunned and told him it wasn't realistic. He brushed it off and reminded me that he was also helping cover travel costs for friends joining him on the trip, then told me to make it work. I told him flat out that if that was truly all the money he planned to leave, then I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine and magically create a holiday out of nothing. We argued for days, going in circles, until he left for his trip anyway. After he was gone, I found an envelope with the same small amount of cash and a note telling me, again, to figure it out. I messaged him and said I'd made my decision. There would be no big holiday this year if this was all we had to work with. He completely lost it. He sent message after message accusing me of being ungrateful, calling me spoiled, and saying I was deliberately ruining the kids' holiday to punish him for going away. According to him, I was trying to guilt him over money he earned himself. I haven't responded since. From my perspective, I wasn't canceling anything out of spite. I just refused to carry the emotional and financial burden alone while he enjoyed a luxury trip. But now he's furious, and I'm left wondering if holding my ground really makes me the villain here. Is protecting my child worth ruining Christmas with my parents? I'm a single dad in my early 50s raising my 13-year-old son on my own. We live across the country from my parents, and while distance helps, it doesn't erase the history. Growing up, my parents, especially my father, used money as leverage, praise as currency, and guilt as discipline. Nothing was ever just given. Everything came with strings, reminders, and unspoken debts. I swore I would never let my child grow up carrying that same emotional weight. Ironically, as grandparents, my parents have been far kinder and more generous than they ever were as parents. My son is their only grandchild, and that fact alone seems to magnify everything they do. Earlier this month, my father asked what my son might want for Christmas. I sent a thoughtful list with a wide range of ideas: books, clothes, hobby supplies, and, almost as an afterthought, a newly released gaming console. A few days later, my father called back and asked whether my son would prefer several smaller gifts or one big one. My son, excited but polite, chose one bigger gift. My father insisted on handling it. We coordinated delivery quietly, and the package is now hidden in my closet, waiting to be wrapped. Then came the phone call that changed everything. What started as a normal conversation suddenly turned sharp and uncomfortable. My father began loudly repeating how he had spent everything on my son's gift. Over and over, he said I needed to make sure my son understood how much money it cost, how much of a sacrifice it was, and how he had drained his savings because of it. He even said something along the lines of, he should know what it costs people when he asks for things like that. My stomach dropped. This was painfully familiar. The same tone, the same guilt, the same manipulation dressed up as generosity. The reality is my parents are not struggling. They are retired but financially secure, receive a very comfortable income, own their home outright, travel frequently, and regularly spend similar amounts on non-essential luxuries. Buying this gift was entirely their choice, from a list they requested. No one pressured them. Yet suddenly, the gift had become a lesson in obligation. I could already hear the echoes of my own childhood forming around my son. And I panicked. Now I'm torn apart. Part of me wants to quietly send my parents a check covering the full cost of the gift, even though that would seriously strain my own budget as a single parent. Another part of me wants to return the gift entirely and put distance between my son and this pattern, even if it means he receives nothing from his grandparents this year. He doesn't know what they bought him yet, but I know that once guilt enters the picture, it never really leaves. I don't want his joy poisoned by someone else's need for control. So now I'm staring at a wrapped box that feels heavier than it should, wondering if protecting my child emotionally means blowing up Christmas all over again. Was I wrong for refusing to cook for a Christmas party I wasn't invited to? I'm a teenage girl who genuinely loves baking and cooking, and over the past few years it's become the way I show care for people around me. I often make treats just because, or help prepare meals for family gatherings since I have more free time than most of the adults. Everyone knows this about me, and it's kind of become my thing, especially during holidays. This year, I was told that Christmas wouldn't be spent all together like usual. I was disappointed, but I accepted it. A few days later, a relative called and casually asked what dishes I was planning to make for Christmas night. I was confused, because no one had mentioned a party to me. She explained that she was hosting a get-together and that my parent had already told her I would be cooking for everyone. I didn't mind helping at first, since I enjoy it and there was still time to plan. But then the conversation shifted. I mentioned getting ready beforehand, and she told me it was an adults-only evening. When I asked for clarification, she listed several cousins close to my age who were invited. I realized I was the only one excluded. The explanation given was that I was not mature enough to attend late events. That hurt more than I expected. I felt embarrassed and used. Mature enough to provide free food for a crowd, but not mature enough to actually be included. I ended the call and spoke to my parent, who didn't see a problem with the arrangement and insisted the decision was final. When I said I wouldn't cook if I wasn't welcome, the argument escalated. I was told I was being selfish, dramatic, and that if I didn't help, everyone else would be inconvenienced. At that point, I was overwhelmed and emotional. I suggested alternatives like ordering food or buying ready-made options, but those ideas were dismissed. Eventually, another parent offered for me to spend Christmas with them instead, somewhere I would actually be wanted. I agreed, which meant I wouldn't even be nearby to help anymore. Now the family gathering is apparently scrambling because they had been counting on me for food. And I'm being painted as the reason things are stressful. From their perspective, I'm refusing out of spite. From mine, I just didn't want to spend Christmas working for a party I wasn't allowed to attend. So was I wrong for saying no?